Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to just jump in today, update you on our wildfires in the state of California, provide some new updates on the number of COVID transmissions in the state, broader trend lines. But I want to first start with an issue that we are keeping our eye on, an issue that is our top priority outside of the situational challenges of dealing with a pandemic and dealing with this unprecedented emergency related to wildfires in the state. And that's the crisis on the streets of the state of California. I want to remind people very briefly that we are making historic investments in housing for the homeless here in the state of California. I've long believed and held a bias that shelters may solve sleep, but housing and supportive services foundationally can help address more permanently the issue of homelessness. And as a construct, we were able to advance this year an effort we refer to as Project Home Key, working with legislature, with their leadership. We were able to set aside some $600 million this year in the budget to purchase hotels and other housing for the homeless, to, for the first time, arguably in state's history, provide a portfolio of support to the cities and the counties, the likes of which we never have had in the past. I want to just briefly update you on some of the progress. This audacious goal of investing some $600 million into this space needs to be completed by the end of the calendar year. We are moving with surgical aggressiveness in terms of advancing these efforts with a kind of focus and energy that we haven't in many, many years. And as a consequence, we are now sending out today our first awards, drawing down from that $600 million, some $76.5 million to procure some 579 units, 10 different projects across 7 jurisdictions in this state. The reason I highlight these jurisdictions is that a number of them are novel. A number of them, like Mendocino County, you see on this list, this is the first ever project of its type within that county. Project areas like Tahoe and Lake Elsinore, they have goals with this first tranche of distribution to functionally get to zero the number of quote unquote homeless in their communities. We also have projects in El Centro focusing on foster youth, in particular, homeless youth, many that have been emancipated or dropped through the cracks in our foster system. Pittsburgh, California, we recently were at a Motel 6 site that's being used currently to provide access and opportunity through a program called Project Room Key to exercise the ability to purchase that hotel outright so that we could provide a permanent cohort of supports for homeless in that community. San Jose needs to be highlighted because I want to just highlight Mayor Sam Liccardo for his stewardship, his leadership, working with the big 13 mayors as he is now chair of that organization. He has been exceptional and incredibly supportive of this effort in advancing this cause, not only within San Jose City, working with county leaders, but moreover, working with other mayors all throughout the state of California, including working with local leadership in Kern County. And I say that because this issue of homelessness impacts the entire state of California. It is no longer a coastal issue. It's not concentrated in just a few dense urban environments in this state. Having traveled most part of this state over the last week, I'm just reminded over and over as we drive and see those underpasses, we drive down streets, sidewalks strewn with camping equipment and people out there in tents, the work we have to do. And so, again, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight this. Many of you tuned in to get an update on the wildfires and COVID, but I want folks to know our commitment, our resolve to addressing this issue. It's not going to happen overnight. We cannot overpromise in this space. The state of California has a responsibility to support cities and counties. The state of California for decades was not focused as much as we would otherwise have liked on this issue. And so we are trying to make up for that, and we are trying to take responsibility and move forward deliberatively. And this Project Home Key, we think, is one of the more meaningful efforts in advancing that cause. And again, I want to just thank all our partners, including the co-chairs, rather, of the work group that we put together on homelessness, Daryl Steinberg, Mayor Steinberg, and Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas for all of their outstanding support as well, representing that work group in advancing this cause. Cause, again, that many of you came to get updated on, though I recognize is the experience we're all having with historic wildfire season. Thought I'd start with this template of understanding. This is a chart that goes back to 1980. You look over a 40-year period, you're seeing the average temperatures between June and September here in the state of California increase from roughly 71 degrees to about 74 degrees. While that may not seem significant, 3 degrees, it is profoundly impactful. Average temperatures in the state of California during these summer months increasing over the last number of decades is a direct cause and effect to the experience that we're currently having, this climate-induced, human activity-induced, climate-induced wildfire season. I made this crystal clear 2 days ago when President Trump was out here in the state and expressed similarly when we were with Senator Harris yesterday here in the state, that we all recognize our responsibility, mutual responsibility, the federal government, the state government, private landowners, all of us doing more and doing better in terms of our vegetation management efforts, our forest management efforts. We stipulate that as self-evident. And that, of course, is being advanced in ways that we have not seen in the past by a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service to more than double the total number of acreage on an annual basis, where we are doing the kind of prescribed burns, doing the kind of thinning that has an environmental construct, at the same time addresses some of the fuel loads in our dense forests. But the fundamental fact cannot be denied, represented in this chart, and the reality of average temperatures significantly increasing. And you see that trend line. That is not going in the right direction. It is going in a direction that only underscores our sense of urgency to address head-on the issue of climate and climate change, and to double down on our efforts here in the state of California, a commitment that I have made very publicly over the course of the last few days, frankly, over the course of many, many years and many different capacities, including my capacity as a former mayor, where we led the state in many categories. California leads the nation, but we have more work still to do. And you'll be hearing a series of those announcements over the next few weeks and months as we advance this cause, a cause that we hold dear in the state of California, and a cause that knows no political party, particularly as it relates to leadership in the state, from Governor Brown to Governor Schwarzenegger, going back to Governor Reagan, who established in 1970 many of the tenets, the California Air Resources Board and others tenets that have become national models in environmental stewardship. We need to reconcile the fact there are no Democratic thermometers and no Republican thermometers. There's fact and there's reality, as well as observed evidence. It's not a belief system, it's an acknowledgement. The facts are the facts. It's not a question of one's belief. It's whether or not you will acknowledge the facts as they're presented, the facts that are in evidence. And we certainly acknowledge them, and we acknowledge our responsibility to do more still in this space. Why? Well, you can see from this chart the challenge that we have in front of us. Here's a chart just looking back over the last 9 years here in the state of California. I reminded people after a very tough wildfire season last year, the Kincaid fire in particular in Northern California, as stressful as that was, the Getty fire, a fire near the Reagan Library itself last year that generated a lot of international headlines, that it was a relatively mild wildfire season in contrast to the last decade. You can see that in this slide, just those two first bars. 3.4 million acres, 3.37 million acres have burned so far in this calendar year. Last year, in the entire calendar year, just 277,000 acres. I don't mean just, because that is a substantial number of acres that were burned by wildfires, but in comparison to this year, it is modest in size. 2018, of course, you see that third bar, 1.975 million acres burned. The Camp Fire, 153,000 acres impacted in and around Paradise related to that fire. 85 lives have lost. That being one of the most destructive and devastating from structural perspective and lives lost perspective, not just acreage perspective. Gives you a sense of the challenge that we're facing and the challenges that we will face moving into the future that are going to require us to be more flexible, less ideological, and more committed to the collective cause of organizing strategies to keep people safe and to maintain our adaptability and our resiliency so that we can work through this challenge and this climate-induced crisis, this emergency that we're facing not only as a state, as a nation, but as a globe and as a world people. As it relates to California's historic wildfire seasons, let me break them down in terms of the total number of fires in a more, I think, easily absorbable terms. Last year, this time, this date, we had 5,136 fires, only burning 152,000 acres. Again, this year, 3.4 million acres, close to 8,000 fires. I'll remind you that it was a month ago yesterday that we started experiencing the impacts of some, nearly 14,000 lightning strikes. It was a month ago yesterday that we can mark that we have now burnt just in the last 31 days or so, 2.8 million acres and have had a tragic loss of 25 lives and thousands of structures. Again, unprecedented number of lightning strikes. Of course, August was unprecedented in terms of heat, record level, record recorded heat in the state of California, including 130 degrees down in Death Valley, which may, as they analyze it more closely, may be a world-breaking record, 130 degrees here in the state of California, hottest August in our history. We're currently battling some 25 major fires, what we refer to as complexes, where fires, 1,100 just in the last 30 days of fire starts. A lot of them start to converge together in larger complexes. We still have 38,000 plus people that have been evacuated, and again, over 3.4 million acres have burned to date. Still battling these wildfires, over 17,000 firefighters, over 2,200 engines, a mutual aid system that comes not only within the state, but 83 engines now that have come from outside of the state, including some 60 engines from the state of Texas. And I want to thank Governor Abbott for his extraordinary support. He has been incredibly responsive for now months here in this state, but in particular is really helping us with that creek fire, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. It just gives you an indication, example of a mutual aid system that knows no politics and that spans not only to states along the West Coast and places like Texas, but includes New Jersey. Governor Murphy picked up the phone and he sent 3 engines from New Jersey. We had firefighters, 10 from Israel, and had the privilege of talking to Prime Minister Trudeau, who has sent out under their mutual aid system 100 plus firefighters to help support our efforts in addition to all of those other states. Again, 25 fatalities to date, and what we know based upon our analysis as we get back in and we repopulate areas, 4,200, and that's why we say plus, because we anticipate this number to grow, but 4,200 structures so far have been destroyed because of these latest fires. Let's talk about the progress on some of these more active fires. Many of these fires, again, have happened in just the last 30 days in the state. We were out there yesterday with Senator Harris in Fresno, in the county. The Creek Fire, which has generated a lot of national attention for good reason. This is an area where we are experiencing uniquely challenging conditions. You see 220,000 acres have burned, 18% current containment. The challenge with this fire in particular is the fact that we are battling this fire impacted explicitly, or rather specifically, fire that's being impacted by the drought that we experienced between 2005 with intensity through 2015, arguably that ended in 2017. That historic drought led to 163 million dead trees. These beetle dead trees, these trees have fallen, these trees act as kindling, these trees are dry. You have climate-induced challenges that we have. You have millions, tens of millions of trees in these forests, and obviously that is a recipe for very challenging conditions, and often those conditions lead to what we are now referring to over and over again as mega fires. And so the creek fire remains top of mind, top of concern. We were out there with the U.S. Forest Services, primarily on federal land. I'll remind you, 57% of the forested land in the state of California, close to 60%, is federal area responsibility. Just 3% in state areas of responsibility. So when we talk about forest fires, we're predominantly talking about the need for partnership with the federal government. That's foundational. And that partnership is advanced. The U.S. Forest Service, the incident command at the Creek Fire is a partnership between CAL FIRE, our state agency, and the U.S. Federal Forest Service, which again is advancing a collaborative new stewardship framework, which will be very promising moving forward, but is also critical in terms of our suppression efforts. The North Complex Fire, it's another fire we visited 48 hours ago for the second time in a week. This fire has been the most devastating in this respect. You see the number of acres, 273,000, which is substantial, representing the largest or sixth largest wildfire in terms of acreage lost in California history. And by the way, the creek is the 12th largest in California history. But the devastation of the North Complex in and around Butte, Plumas, and Lassen County is the 15 lives that have been lost that we know of to date just in this complex, which is obviously devastating. And I just want to express our deepest condolences to the families that have lost loved ones, and to the heroism of our first responders that have been out there doing their best to support evacuation efforts, to work with local sheriffs and local first responders to support folks moving into safe locations as these fires rage. This again, just 36% contained to date. As it relates to fires that have been active for some time, I reminded you a week or so ago on the 8th of September that one of the largest complexes in history of the state, the LNU complex, it was 91% contained, 375,000 acres. Today, they've made even more containment, up to 97%, and you're starting to see that amount of acreage decline. The CZU, this is the forest fire. If you were ever in doubt about climate change, just consider the CZU complex. This is what they refer to as a fire that has occurred in an asbestos forest. This is a coastal fire, predominantly along the coast, where you have coastal conditions that have led to some of the most majestic living trees on the planet. Trees that go back, in some cases, 2,000 years. These majestic redwoods. In a redwood forest that goes down to the coast, we had a 24-hour period where 44,000 acres were burned in just a 24-hour period along the coast. Again, if you were ever in doubt about climate impacts as it relates to these forest fires, just consider in this asbestos forest that kind of fire activity. That CZU complex is beyond just that immediate area, but nonetheless, we're seeing better containment today than we did last week, 93% containment. The August fire, the largest in California history, that complex, it continues to grow. It was 356,000 acres last week. It's 817 acres this week. A lot of that is brush, not just forest fire, a lot of grass fire as well. But nonetheless, the containment's been stubborn, a little bit of progress, but you can see that acreage growth has been rather substantial. Another area of concern I wanted to highlight is LA County Bobcat Fire, 0% containment. This is getting a lot of attention for good reason. It's a stubborn fire, difficult, challenging conditions in LA County, 8,500 acres, 0% containment last week. It has grown to 44,000 acres, just 3% contained this week. As we pull back and we see containment on a number of these larger complexes. And we are making progress, not just on the LNU and the CZU, which you saw, but the SCU complex and a number of other, the Oak and Willow complexes, where we've seen substantial containment. We're now able to put more resources on these other fires, including the Bobcat fire in LA County. And speaking of counties, San Diego County was challenged with the Valley fire last week, 3% containment. We have made tremendous progress on that fire, maintaining the acreage at 17,000 today, 90% containment versus 3. It's a point of reference with all of these that real progress has been made, is being made, and that's the heroism of these incredible firefighters. And I just want to thank the public, by the way. You travel around the state, all of those wonderful signs. I met with a number of firefighters with Senator Harris yesterday in Fresno, and it's not lost on any of us how impactful it is when a family takes pen to paper and puts out a nice sign just thanking first responders, thanking their firefighters. You see those all throughout the county in Fresno. And I just want to thank members of the public that took the time to thank their first responders, these heroes. It makes a big difference to their morale. And it's just a point of pride as governor to see that. And so it's just a point of personal privilege. I just want to acknowledge that and thank members of the public for expressing that sentiment as much as they have. And you've seen it all over the state, but it was really in particular visible all around that creek fire in Fresno County yesterday. El Dorado, this got a lot of attention in San Bernardino, 10% contained last week. Again, real progress this week, 60% contained, modest growth in acreage. Again, just one of the many larger complexes that we are battling in this state. So that's an update on the wildfires. The good news is while we have a little red flag conditions, modest red flag conditions in the northern part of the state, the wind conditions have been, relatively speaking, more favorable in the last week or so. And as a consequence, we are making some real progress on these larger complexes. And while it's absolutely true, we have an enormous amount of work to do. Again, I just want to acknowledge that a number of these complexes are no longer on our list of major complexes because of the suppression and because of the containment that has been done. And it's just testament to CAL FIRE and the mutual aid system and all the hard work, the stubborn hard work that includes hand crews and others out there on the front line. So if the weather can continue to hold, potential precipitation in Northern California up and around the Oregon border, which may help us with the Siskiyou fire and some other fires in that county, that is potentially very relieving and point of some optimism as we move forward. Speaking of some optimism, we are moving forward in seeing a decline in the rate of spread and transmission of COVID-19. You can see here, September 15th, 2,950 positive cases. We're reporting a 7-day average down to 3,348. Significant nonetheless, but a 7-day average that is substantially lower than we've seen in a number of months in this state. We are turning the corner and suppressing this latest increase in the case growth rate of COVID-19. You can see that specifically on the positivity rate chart, which many of you are very familiar with. We're starting to see our testing come back, getting closer to that 100,000+ average number of daily tests. I'll remind you, we're a number of weeks out for our new Perkins-Elder partnership to come into shape, where we will substantially start to increase the total number of daily tests. We're not backing off on our commitment to increase the total daily tests. We want to substantially increase the total daily volume. We've been stressed the last 3 weeks, however, by these fires that have impacted a lot of our mobile testing sites. Air quality issues have impacted accessibility to these sites. And while it's true the last 4 out of 5 days, we've had in excess of 100,000 tests a day. Those numbers over a 7-day period are just shy of that 100,000 goal. But nonetheless, the positivity rate is also declining at 3.6% over a 14-day period and at 3.6% over the last 7 days. So positivity rate in the state of California down to 3.6% statewide, both on the 7-day average and the 14-day average. We continue to see real progress with hospitalizations down 22% over a 14-day period. You can see from this chart that that represents 4% now of our total healthcare system capacity, number of people with COVID-19 in our hospitals. As it relates to ICUs, also 22% decrease in ICU patients over the last 14 days. And our ICU critical care capacity, total number of COVID positive patients represents 10%, again, substantially down from numbers we have seen over the course of the last few months. What's also down are the number of counties that are in these purple tiers. I'm going to ask Dr. Galley to come up in a moment. He highlighted yesterday in his Zoom presentation the status of our counties as it relates to what tier these counties are in. When we last updated you, we had 33 counties in purple, 14 in red. We announced yesterday, Dr. Galley announced that we went from 33 counties in purple to 30 counties, went from 14 counties in red, the next tier up, to 17 counties. We anticipate the number of orange and yellow counties growing next week as we will be 3 weeks into this new tiered strategy. But Dr. Galley can talk a little bit more about where he sees things going as it relates to these different tiers, and also express the kind of work or discuss and update you on the work we're doing with counties to express the dynamic and the engagement that we are having on a consistent basis around data, around making sure that we are all using the same data sets and addressing some ambiguities and disparities that are part and parcel of a state as large as ours and part of this process, this dynamic process that we put together as it relates to this new tiered plan. We're sticking to it. We're committed to it over the long run. But Dr. Galley can speak more specifically about where we are, where he thinks things are going over the next week or so. Doctor?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Governor. Yes, yesterday we updated our tiers as we do every Tuesday and moved 3 counties. It was Marin County, Inyo, and Tehama County, all moved from purple to red, reducing the number of purple counties to 30 and increasing red counties to 17. As the governor mentioned, it will be next week, the first week that we see red counties move to orange and orange potentially move to yellow. So we'll look forward to that update. We know we're in close conversations with a number of counties that may be making that transition based on the consistency of their data. So we'll be updating that next week. Just to reiterate a couple of things that the governor said, we're in lots of active conversations with our counties. There's small counties in California where their data changes, small changes in data could lead to major changes in the calculations of our data. We're working with them, specifically those small counties. I appreciate health officers in the small counties, the supervisors, other non-elected leaders in those counties having those detailed conversations with us so we get it right. We make sure we have the data. So as we stick to the plan, the slow, stringent plan, counties staying in a tier for at least 3 weeks, consistent data of the lower tier for at least 2 weeks, consecutive weeks before they move, that we do that with the level of responsibility and accountability that we expect. I know that there was a great deal of conversation about San Diego County, large county that moved to red fairly quickly from the purple tier, that we have been in active conversation about their number, some of the data elements that help us make accurate calculations. And as we look forward to next week, the potential that San Diego County meets for 2 consecutive weeks, the need to go to a more restrictive tier. If that's what the data shows, that's what the state is going to expect. We anticipate working hard with their health leaders, their other leaders in the county to make sure that that data is accurate. But if that's what it shows, that's what we will expect of not just San Diego County, but all counties in the pursuit of making sure that we stick to this slow, stringent plan, that we get through flu season, that we get into winter, and we allow ourselves the sort of runway to make sure that our health system is prepared, that we don't see sudden surges in cases, and that we really follow the thoughtful plan that we have put out. So we look forward to continuing those updates, working with your counties. And as the governor said, we're reaching levels of transmission that are lower than we've seen in many months, but we still need to continue to keep our guard up. One reporter asked me what I worry the most about, and it really is that we begin to let our guard down, that we do less of the social, physical distancing that we've talked about, that we allow ourselves to enter environments where transmission might be higher because more people that we're not used to spending time with are gathering, that we forget to keep our mask on as much as we can. All of those things are key tools that we see more and more evidence of helping us control and reduce transmission. So I look forward to continuing to give the updates, hopefully seeing these numbers continue to come down as we march through this process into fall and winter. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So again, as Dr. Galley said, new counties that were added to the red tier: Marin, Inyo, and Tehama County. Based upon the progress, based upon the data that we're seeing in many other counties, we expect more counties to be moving in the right direction, and look forward next week to updating this tiered status database and providing you even more clarity on where we believe we're going. But as Dr. Galley said, it is absolutely foundational to learn the lessons from 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend, from the experiences of the past. We just went through a long 3-day weekend. That data has not come in. These are lagging. That's information comes in over the course of the next few weeks. And that's why we have tiered status and we have buffers between the tiers. We want stability between tiers. And so we'll maintain our vigilance in this space, again, driven by this data, driven by the framework that we worked with county health officers to develop, and also driven by a recognition that we maintain a willingness to engage. And when new information, new data presents itself, when new facts present themselves, that by definition, we maintain an openness and a willingness to engage and to dialogue. And so it's a way of expressing this. We will be making announcements soon as it relates to theme parks and amusement parks, making announcements soon as it relates to some areas, industries, as well as sectors, and making additional guidelines or putting out additional guidelines in those space very, very shortly. I'm not here today to make that presentation, but want folks to know we are actively working in a number of sectors, and we'll be making public the fruits of those negotiations and those efforts very, very shortly. I'll end, as I always do, about the imperative and importance and power of wearing a mask. It was, I thought, very interesting today to read, as I hope many of you did or will soon, what the CDC director said about the power and potency of the non-pharmaceutical intervention of wearing a mask being as a potent, or perhaps even more potent than a vaccine. Take a look at the CDC director's comments today about the power and importance of wearing a mask, wearing a face covering. Again, importance of physically distancing as we start to modify these stay-at-home orders, as we move into new tiers. The likelihood of people mixing outside of their family cohorts or household cohorts increases. That's why the mask wearing is so foundational, and maintaining your proximity to others in a way that's safe as it relates to mitigating the spread of this disease. Always doing the work on hygiene, and again, minimizing the extent possible mixing more broadly when you're out and about and doing the things that all of us need to do to live our lives. So that's it, broad strokes. That's an update where we are in the wildfires, update where we are as relates to our COVID response. As always, we're happy to take now any questions.
Emily Hoven, Cal Matters.
A couple of questions about the unemployment strike team that you formed on July 29th. When you formed the team, you said that they would deliver a roadmap of short, mid, and long-term solutions within 45 days. It's been more than 45 days, so I was wondering if you could share when Californians can expect to see this roadmap and when its solutions will start getting implemented.
Well, we've been working to make real-time adjustments, real-time amendments. We've kept you abreast of those for now 90 to 120 days. As it relates to the specific report, we are just days away from making public that report. Full transparency, that report is all but done, but what I wanted to see, which is not yet complete and will be quite literally in the next few days, is I want to see the response to the question you just asked, and that's the response from EDD, what they're going to do with these recommendations, these short-term, medium, and long-term recommendations. We need more specificity, more detail in the EDD response to those recommendations. But I want to thank the work that has been done, tremendous amount of work that has gone into this effort. We're blessed as it relates to the co-chairs of this task force to have the insight and expertise of someone who I've been remiss not to highlight, and that's Jen Polka. Started Code for America, also worked in the Obama administration to bring private sector technology and best practices to bear in terms of government operations. She joined as co-chair with this task force to help us make recommendations and to advance some of our efforts on transparency and technological improvements. So she and the rest of the team have done tremendous amount of work. EDD is responding in kind to those efforts, and we will be responding to your query and question in the next few days.
Stephanie Sierra, ABC 7.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you for taking my question. I'm curious how your children are doing with education. Are they participating in distance learning, or have they been able to return to in-person instruction in class?
Yeah, I've got 4 kids. It's 4 different experiences. Any parent knows exactly what I'm saying. My oldest turns 11 this Friday. Happy birthday, Montana. As she's reminded me for 6 months, it's almost her birthday. Now it quite literally is almost her birthday Friday. Her experience as almost an 11-year-old is very different than the experience of my 6 and 8-year-olds, which have been more challenging. They are currently in front of a screen. They are currently struggling to maintain their focus. And the younger you are, I think the more difficult it is, and understandably so. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of intensity, not only for our kids, but for our parents, for me, for my wife, and those that are supporting us. And so it's a very challenging time, and my deep empathy and deep understanding of parents out there, millions of you that are struggling with similar experiences. And that is why it is so fundamental, so foundational that we succeed in maintaining the progress we've made in reducing the transmission of this disease. 3.6% positivity rate is encouraging, but we've got to hold the line. And that means doing the things that we have done over the last few months to bend that curve and those transmission rates. The minute we pull back, we can start seeing those rates go back up, pushing us further and further away from getting our kids back where they belong. And that's with in-person instruction to deal not only with academic needs, but social-emotional needs, which are so foundational to our children's development. We'll do that safely. We'll do that in partnership with our paraprofessionals, our teachers, and with our health officers and district leaders. But nonetheless, we are marching closer and closer to that moment as we see a substantial reduction in the spread of this virus.
Nico Savage, Mercury News.
Governor, wanted to ask about college football. The Big Ten Conference announced today that new rapid testing protocols are going to allow its programs to move forward in the fall season. There's a group of USC players who support doing the same thing in the Pac-12. They sent you a letter noting that the conference has a similar partnership for rapid testing, but promulgate guidance prohibiting teams from practicing in groups of more than a dozen, which obviously makes football impossible. Is that rapid testing agreement enough to safely bring back college football in California this fall? Or is there more that you would still want to be done before you support it?
Well, we put out guidelines a month or so ago, and we aligned them. We worked with the NC2A, and we aligned them with the NC2A. There's nothing in the state guidelines that denies the Pac-12 from having conference games. There's nothing in our guidelines the state put out that denies these games from occurring. We put out very, I thought, thoughtful guidelines, and again, partnership with the NC2A about cohorting during workouts and practices. Now, this manifests very differently depending on the sport. Basketball, cohorting of up to 12, maybe a little easier than football up to 12, but offensive teams, defensive teams are able to coordinate and practice and the like. And so I want to make this crystal clear. Nothing in the state guidelines deny the ability for the Pac-12 to resume. Quite the contrary. That has been a misrepresentation of the facts. But what is accurate, and I appreciate the frame of your question, that the NC2A has made progress. Pac-10, which will be resuming, at least based on their announcement on October 23rd, they've made a lot of progress on testing. That was one of the foundational principles that we put forward with our guidance. A lot of antigen tests. We also need some PCR tests, and we are working with the not only NC2A, but with Pac-12 in this space. I talked to Larry Scott about 2 hours ago. And so we're committed to working with the Pac-12, working with the NC2A to keep our kids safe, to keep our coaches safe, to keep the coaching staff and friends and families safe, and to keep the larger campus community safe. Remember, these are student athletes. They're not isolated in a bubble as some of our NBA superstars are. They need to be integrated in one way, shape, or form with an academic paradigm. By definition, that's what student athletes are supposedly all about. That's a deeper issue for all of us, is to make sure that the academic rigor is such that we're doing justice to that paradigm and principle. But nonetheless, there is nothing in those state guidelines to deny these games from resuming. So once again, look forward to working as we have been in a constructive dialogue with the Pac-12 and NC2A on testing issues. Again, good progress in that space. And as it relates to cohorting, we are certainly willing to engage and have now engaged the Pac-12 in that discussion as well.
Adam Beam, AP.
Hi, Governor. You talked about looking at a community holistically in determining whether businesses can reopen. In San Diego, where the rate of infection has risen recently, officials are lobbying to exclude college students from the county's overall infection rate. But most of those students and staff live in the community. Would you consider special exceptions like the one sought in San Diego?
No, I thought you framed the question appropriately as it relates to community spread, as it remains to what a community by definition, and that is integrated individuals. And as a consequence, you can't isolate as if it's on an island, a campus community that is part of the larger community. So the answer is no.
Jeremy White, Politico.
I have a fairly similar question to that. San Diego, particularly if they move into that more restrictive tier next week, we've been doing a fair amount of fluctuating between more and less restrictive tiers in the last not so long. Are you concerned about the ability of businesses to navigate that type of whiplash as they sort of move back and forth between different restrictions on their ability to operate?
Absolutely. As a former business person myself, the answer is absolutely. I'm concerned about that. And that's why it's incumbent upon local health officials, local leaders to do everything they can to mitigate the spread of this disease. We put out a framework. We work with local health officers all across the state to put out this new tiered status. We're guided by the data. And if you can see to it, all of us in every community across the state, in every county, city across the state, continue to make progress, stubborn progress that's necessary, pursuant to the guidelines we put out to mitigate the spread and transmission of this disease, then we will have more continuity, more constancy in terms of potential whiplash back and forth between these tiers. And so that's foundational but absolutely that concerns me as a former businessman myself, someone that is deeply steeped in understanding the challenges that restaurants have and retail have, having owned restaurants and retail in the past. And so I am deeply sensitive to that. And obviously hope we can make progress, not just in San Diego, but across this state to continue to mitigate the spread and continue to move positively through these tiers, not back and forth between tiers.
Alexei Kosev, SF Chronicle.
Hi, Governor. You sent out a fundraising email yesterday touting your confrontation with President Trump on climate change, but it was a rather soft one in which you basically agreed to disagree and asked him to respect your difference of opinion on how climate change was contributing to the fires. This kind of fits a pattern in which you not directly confronted him on these issues when you had the chance face to face. I'm wondering if you could speak about why you've taken that tack.
Well, we directly confronted the President of the United States 48 hours ago on climate change. We did that very, very directly in the presence of the President of the United States. So respectfully, our positions are well advanced, not only privately, but very publicly. And certainly in that instance, we'll continue to assert ourselves as a state, leading the nation in low carbon green growth goals that I think need to be modified based upon current conditions that we're experiencing and the reality of climate change, the smash mouth reality of climate change, droughts, mega fires, and the heat waves that we're experiencing, heat domes, not just here in the state, but throughout the Western United States. So we have been forceful in our policy making. We've been forceful in our resolve. We've been forceful and very direct in our rhetoric.
Alex Michelson, Fox 11.
Thank you, Governor. A little bit more on that topic. I mean, it was quite a difference in the days between your meeting with President Trump and then your meeting with Senator Harris. I'm wondering, if you will, when you talked to President Trump, if you felt heard on the climate issue, and if not, what do you think are the consequences for this state?
Well, the state is involved in over 100 lawsuits with this administration. At last count, plus or minus, 50 to 55 of them are in the area of the environment. We've not been shy about asserting ourselves in that space. I, in particular, have been very aggressive in our efforts on vehicle emission standards, working with large automobile manufacturers directly to undermine the president's efforts to vandalize the progress that was made under the Obama administration on reducing greenhouse gas emissions by increasing our miles per gallon standards by decreasing the cost at the gas pump. We've worked with Ford and many others to advance that cause. We just led the nation yet again on our efforts to provide for zero emission heavy duty trucks. We have 15 states that joined a coalition in this space. So the consequences are real, but I'm asserting a point to you in the frame of your question that despite the work we're doing against the administration in our litigation strategy, we're still making progress underneath all of that, working at a subnational level and working with private sector to advance this collective cause. So while we're discouraged on one hand, we're not diminished in terms of our capacity as a state as large as ours that punches above its weight in our ability to advance this cause. Accordingly, I was with Senator Harris yesterday promoting the candidacy, not only her candidacy, but Vice President Biden's candidacy. I think the most determinative thing will be advanced in November as it relates to this collective effort. And I say collective because California is involved with the U.S. Climate Alliance that includes 24 states that are advancing a similar cause that the state of California is advancing. It represents 55% of our nation's population. It's a kind of partnership that this state has formed. It's not the only partnership. We have a Pacific Coast collaborative with Oregon and Washington, where we've been very forceful and aligned in our low carbon green growth strategies. And just today, I had a conference with Premier of South Africa and with the Vice Chancellor of, the Vice Premier of Scotland, talking about our MOU under 2 where we have 220 jurisdictions representing 43% of the world's GDP that has advanced the cause that California is submitted to, and that is to substitute the lack of resolve and leadership on climate change and advance the principles of the Paris Accords. I'll just close on this final point. California's population is larger than 163 of the 196 nations that signed those Paris Accords. We are committed to the Paris Accord, and we do so from a position of real strength and real influence. And so we'll continue to maintain that strength and that influence despite whatever disagreements we have with the current administration. But as it relates to the final point, and forgive me for being so long-winded to the first part of your question, do I think we were heard? Yeah, I do think we were heard. And I think there's a way of approaching people. Good people can disagree. And I maintain that we are making progress. And to the extent we're being heard, I believe we are. And to the extent that I expect the President of the United States to radically change course, no, I do not. And so we'll continue to be stubborn. I imagine he will be as well in his point of view. But as I say, it's not a belief system. Data science are not beliefs. You have to acknowledge facts, and we'll continue not just to assert our own set of facts, but readily available facts that are in evidence and align ourselves, not with that belief, but that understanding of what those facts are producing and the reality on the ground, particularly in a state like California.
Final question, Patrick Healy, NBC4.
Hi, thank you. Governor, Dr. Galley yesterday spoke of introducing a new metric for the tiers, a health equity metric. Are you in a position to shed some light on what that standard would be and when it would take effect? And also, if I may, if you could give us just a little more specificity on what exactly has to happen before the Pac-12 can resume football. Thank you.
Well, they can resume football. There's nothing in the guidelines that say the Pac-12 cannot move forward, period, full stop. So I just want to make that crystal clear. As it relates to Dr. Galley introducing something, he didn't introduce something yesterday, introduced something a number of weeks back when we put out the new tiered status. One of the first slides we presented was on the equity question. The question, of course, is one left better for Dr. Galley to answer than I, but nonetheless, equity is foundational in this respect. We don't want people to game the system. We don't want people to under-test. We don't want people just to test asymptomatic people so they can game the outcome, so that they can move forward with blinders on, not a real understanding of community spread. And so that's the foundational principle of equity. It's about more transparency in terms of testing protocols, and it's about a socioeconomic framework that's also foundational as a value and principle that this state has long advanced, and certainly this administration is committed to. But more important than my point of view is Dr. Galley's, who is responsible and entrusted for advancing it.
Thanks again, Governor, and thanks for the question. Yes, yesterday we highlighted again the equity measure and the determination and the focus of the state to really advance a measure that leaves no communities behind. We mentioned this the very first day we launched the framework. We said then that we continue to work with our counties to make sure we choose a measure that reflects really the entirety of California. We're going to be asking counties to focus on this even more than many of them have already. They've made tremendous progress in many ways, many counties have, but we expect more. We still see counties where test positivity is really high in some of their communities and much lower in others. And that follows the theme of disproportionately impacted communities, Latino communities, Black communities, other communities that we distinguish and can identify, and that we don't want to see any community left behind. We want the focus to be all of government. It's not just a public health issue, it's a total issue. It's our health leaders who have been voices around equity for decades, chose to go into public health because of the equity concerns. A state that has for a long time, not just on COVID, but on many other issues, recognized that we have to come together and lift all communities up. that we want to see not just more testing, but more focus on making sure that once we identify someone who is positive, that we do all of the things to cut down the routes of transmission, that single positive case does not become another or a dozen other cases. So we continue to work with the counties to make sure we choose something that really does get to this equity issue. And as we have those conversations, thoughtful conversations with electeds, other health officers and health leaders in those communities, and other Californians have been thinking about health equity for a long time, we expect to share that with you. I know it's taken, from my point of view, a little longer than we'd hoped and expected, but we want to make sure that we get it right so we focus on these equity issues in a real way that is true to the California value.
Thanks, Dr. Gallion. Again, thank you, everybody, for the privilege of your time. And again, I cannot express enough thanks and gratitude to all of our CAL FIRE personnel on the front line, the mutual aid that we're receiving all across this country in support of the heroic work these firefighters are doing to mitigate the spread of these large fire complexes, wildfire complexes all throughout the state of California. And also to each and every one of you for the good work you've done over the last couple of months to mitigate the spread, in this case of COVID-19, to get our numbers below 4%, to see some stability over a 14-day period at 3.6% positivity. If we continue down that path, we'll continue to make progress on reopening more fully our economy and getting our schools to reopen as well safely. Most important thing you can do is to wear a face covering when you're out and about and practice physical distancing. Take care, everybody, and thank you.